Jimin burst into tears after Jungkook called him just a friend. The truth was different. Broken heart, crying face. The glass trembled in Jungkook's hand as he shouted, "You're just a friend. Jimin, why are you making this a big deal?" His voice cracked the air like lightning, sharp and unforgiving, and the room seemed to shrink around them. Jimin froze mid-step, his breath shattering in his chest before spilling out in small, broken gasps. The polished studio mirrors caught the moment his composure finally snapped, reflecting the trembling of his shoulders as tears burst from him without restraint. The world blurred into silver streaks and fluorescent light, and even the smell of rain blowing in from the cracked window felt sharper, colder, as if the entire city exhaled with him. Jimin tried to speak, but no words came, only the raw ache of something too deep and too complicated to fit into sentences. Jungkook watched helplessly, the anger in his expression melting into horror. He hadn't intended to hurt Jimin, not like this, not this brutally, but the truth he carried inside him had twisted itself into guilt, fear, and longing so tightly that he could no longer distinguish one emotion from the other. He turned away, gripping the back of a chair so hard his knuckles went pale, but Jimin's soft, broken whimper stopped him like a hand at his throat. Rain began tapping against the window faster, wind humming through the narrow crack as if the sky itself leaned in to listen. Jimin wiped his cheeks with the back of his sleeve, but the tears kept coming, each one heavy with the weight of years of staying by Jungkook's side, years of laughing too loudly at his jokes, years of pretending that his heart didn't race whenever Jungkook smiled at him. Even now, even in this moment of humiliation, he couldn't look at Jungkook without feeling that dangerous softness in his chest. Jungkook swallowed, struggling to steady his voice. "Jimin, I didn't mean it like that. I was just," but the words snagged on the truth he was desperately trying to keep buried. He had called him just a friend because the alternative terrified him. Because admitting what he really felt meant tearing down the walls he had built for years. Because Jimin was the only person who could break him effortlessly. Jimin's voice finally surfaced, quiet but trembling with pain. "Just a friend. After everything?" His fingers curled at his sides, nails digging crescents into his palms as memories surged. Late-night talks, the way Jungkook sometimes looked at him as if he were something fragile and precious, the unspoken promises in the silence between them. "Why would you say something like that?" Jungkook's heartbeat thundered in his ears, drowning the world. He stepped forward instinctively, but stopped himself when he saw Jimin flinch, barely perceptible, yet devastating. He felt something break inside him. "Because," he whispered, "if I didn't say it, I wouldn't be able to control the way I feel around you." His confession slipped out before he could stop it, softer than the sound of the rain but heavier than any storm. Jimin's breath hitched, his tears slowing as confusion overtook hurt. His gaze lifted, meeting Jungkook's dark, conflicted eyes. Jungkook looked exhausted, like someone who had been fighting a war no one else could see. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight, but his eyes, those always honest eyes, were trembling. Jungkook inhaled shakily. "I didn't call you just a friend because that's what you are," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "I said it because I didn't know how to deal with what happens to me when I'm close to you." Jimin blinked, stunned. The rain's rhythm filled the silence between them, each drop like a heartbeat echoing through the room. His chest tightened, but in a different way now, less like breaking, more like awakening. Jungkook moved closer, slowly this time, as if giving Jimin every chance to pull away. When he reached out, his fingertips barely brushed Jimin's sleeve, but the warmth there spread like fire through both of them. "You scare me," he admitted, the truth shaking loose, raw and unfiltered. "Not because of anything bad, but because of how much you mean to me." Jimin's lips parted in disbelief. For a moment, neither of them breathed. The world felt suspended, held in place by the faint buzz of the studio lights and the storm outside. Jungkook continued, voice breaking in honesty he could no longer contain. "You're not just a friend, Jimin. You've never been. I just didn't know how to say it without ruining everything." Jimin stepped closer, his hand trembling as he placed it over Jungkook's. The warmth of skin against skin was grounding, electric, frightening. His tears had dried, leaving only the faint shine on his cheeks. "You didn't ruin anything," he whispered. "You just made me realize I wasn't the only one who was scared." Jungkook's eyes softened, guilt and relief swirling together. Their breaths mingled, and the silence between them turned gentle, intimate. There was no cliffhanger waiting, no sudden interruption, only the quiet truth settling into the space they finally created for it. And in that rain-soaked, mirror-lined studio, with their hands trembling together, both of them understood that the word friend had never been enough for what they were to each other. The storm continued outside, but inside, something tender and new finally began to bloom. The air between Jimin and Jungkook, however, was far more turbulent than anything happening beyond the glass. They stood close, too close, and neither of them knew how to step back after everything that had just been confessed. Jungkook's fingers twitched under Jimin's hand, a subtle tremor betraying the chaos swirling inside him. His chest rose and fell rapidly, as though every breath cost him a piece of the restraint he'd clung to for years. Jimin felt the same tremble in himself, an adrenaline-laced mixture of fear, longing, and disbelief. They had broken open something delicate, something dangerous, and now it was impossible to pretend it hadn't happened. Jimin, Jungkook whispered, voice thick with something desperate. Say something. Anything. His grip tightened slightly, enough to show he didn't want to let go. Jimin swallowed, his throat dry despite the taste of rain in the air. What do you expect me to say? His voice came out softer than he intended, but the emotion underneath it was sharp, almost trembling. You tell me I'm just a friend and then you say I scare you because of how much I mean to you. You can't just switch like that. Jungkook's jaw clenched. I didn't switch. I panicked. That's different. Jimin let out a shaky exhale, eyes lifting to search Jungkook's. Then tell me the truth. All of it. Not half of it. Not the safe version. I deserve that much. Jungkook looked away, running a hand through his damp hair, the strands sticking to his forehead. The movement exposed the tension in his shoulders, the tight coil of conflict pulling him apart. The truth is, I've been trying not to feel this for so long that I don't even know how to stop hiding it. Jimin's breath caught. How long? Jungkook laughed once, humorless and bitter. Too long. Longer than I want to admit. Before you even realized we weren't just kids anymore. He turned back to Jimin, eyes darker than before. But I thought keeping distance was better. Safer. For both of us. Jimin stepped closer, not realizing it until Jungkook inhaled sharply at the sudden proximity. Their chests were inches apart, and Jimin could feel the warmth radiating from Jungkook's skin, the tightness of his breath. Safer from what? Jimin whispered. Jungkook hesitated, and the silence that followed cracked like a fault line. From wanting you too much. Jimin felt the ground tilt beneath him. Heat shot through his veins, not from flattery but from the weight of all the years spent pretending nothing was happening between them. Jungkook's confession wasn't gentle, it was explosive, reckless, and raw. Before Jimin could respond, the studio door slammed open. They jerked apart as Taehyung stepped inside, drenched from the rain, his hair flattened against his forehead. His gaze swept the room in an instant, catching the leftover tension suspended in the air, the redness in Jimin's eyes, the way Jungkook's hands were still shaking. What did I walk into? Taehyung asked slowly, eyes narrowing. You two look like you're seconds away from either killing each other or Taehyung. Jungkook snapped, too fast, too forceful. Jimin flinched at the tone. Taehyung's eyebrows rose in suspicion, but he didn't say anything else. Instead, he moved closer to Jimin, his expression softening when he noticed the tear stains drying on his cheeks. What happened? Taehyung asked quietly, touching Jimin's shoulder with gentle concern. Jungkook's expression darkened at the sight, jealousy flickering so quickly across his face Jimin almost thought he imagined it. Jimin's voice was quiet. We just talked. Taehyung didn't buy it. His gaze flicked between them, lingering a second too long on Jungkook's defensive posture. Talked, Taehyung repeated, skepticism thick in his tone. Right. Before anyone could say more, Jungkook suddenly grabbed his jacket, breathing uneven. I need air, he muttered, brushing past both of them as he stormed out of the studio. The door slammed behind him. Taehyung blinked. Okay. Definitely not just talked. Jimin sat down slowly, the weight of everything catching up to him. His head fell into his hands, fingers digging into his hair as he tried to steady his breath. The storm outside rattled the windows even harder, as if echoing the turmoil inside him. Taehyung crouched beside him, voice gentle. Jimin, what did he say to you? Jimin looked up, his eyes shimmering with confusion, fear, and something dangerously close to hope. He said I wasn't just a friend. That he's been trying not to feel something for a long time. He swallowed, voice cracking. But I don't know what he really wants. I don't know if he's ready for what that means. Outside, through the thin studio walls, footsteps echoed down the hallway, heavy, frantic, desperate. Jungkook wasn't just leaving. He was running from something he could no longer hide from. Jimin pressed a trembling hand to his chest, where his heartbeat pulsed too fast, too uneven. Taehyung, he whispered, words barely audible. What if I can't handle the truth when he finally says all of it? Taehyung didn't have an answer. The storm raged harder. Inside, Jimin's emotions did the same. Two truths hung between all of them, one spoken, messy, unfinished, and one unspoken, darker, waiting to be revealed. And Jimin knew, for better or worse, that nothing between him and Jungkook would ever be the same again. The night had deepened into a heavy, suffocating darkness by the time Jimin stepped out of the studio. The hallways were empty, washed in dim blue light that flickered occasionally as the storm raged outside. He wrapped his arms around himself, though the chill that ran through him wasn't from the cold. Jungkook had been gone for nearly an hour, and Taehyung had finally left after trying unsuccessfully to convince Jimin to go home and rest. But Jimin couldn't leave. Not while Jungkook was somewhere in this building, unraveling alone. His footsteps echoed sharply as he walked, each sound louder than it should be in the silence. His heart thudded unevenly, matching the rhythm of the storm outside. He rehearsed lines in his head, things he wanted to say, things he was afraid to say, things he didn't even know how to say. Everything felt swollen and heavy, emotions so intense they seemed to press against his ribs. He found Jungkook in the practice room at the far end of the building, the one with the broken speaker and the wall-length windows. The lights were off, but the storm illuminated the room in flashes, each burst of lightning revealing Jungkook's figure hunched near the mirror, head bowed, his hands gripping his hair as though he was trying to tear something out of himself. Jungkook, Jimin whispered. Jungkook flinched violently, then turned his head just enough to see Jimin standing at the door. His eyes were red, more from frustration than tears, though Jimin couldn't be sure. The muscles in Jungkook's arms were tight, straining under the dim light, and he looked like he was holding himself together with pure will. You shouldn't be here, Jungkook said, voice hoarse. Jimin stepped inside anyway, closing the door behind him. You ran out. I had to find you. Jungkook let out a bitter laugh, rubbing his face hard. Of course you did. You always do. You come after me every damn time I push you away. Jimin's breath hitched. Because I care about you. That's the problem, Jungkook snapped, standing abruptly. You care too much. And he cut himself off, jaw tightening. I don't know how to handle that. Jimin swallowed hard. Then let me help you. Just talk to me. You don't want what's in my head right now, Jungkook muttered. Try me. A flash of lightning lit Jungkook's face, revealing the naked torment in his expression. I'm angry, he confessed. But not at you. At myself. At the way I lie. At the way I can't control anything when it comes to you. Jimin felt a sting in his chest. Jungkook, do you know what it feels like, Jungkook continued, stepping toward him slowly, to want something so much you start to hate yourself for wanting it? Jimin's heartbeat accelerated. What are you talking about? You, Jungkook said sharply. I'm talking about you. Silence crashed over them. The storm howled outside, but inside the room, time seemed to freeze. Jimin stared at him, stunned. Jungkook took another step forward, closing the distance between them until Jimin could feel the warmth of his breath. You think I pushed you away today because I don't feel anything? Jungkook said, voice low and strained. I pushed you because I feel too damn much. And every time I get close to you, I lose pieces of myself. Jimin's lips parted, a tremor running through him. You don't lose yourself, he whispered. You're just scared. I'm terrified, Jungkook corrected. Of how much I want to touch you. Of how much I look at you and forget everything else. Of how different you make me. He reached out, hesitating just inches from Jimin's cheek. His fingers brushed the air near Jimin's skin, trembling, and I hate it, Jungkook whispered. Because wanting you shouldn't feel this dangerous. Jimin stepped into his touch, letting Jungkook's hand finally land on his cheek. The warmth of his palm felt like fire spreading through Jimin's skin. It's only dangerous if you run from it, Jimin murmured. Jungkook inhaled sharply, his thumb brushing Jimin's cheekbone. You don't know what you're asking for. Then tell me, Jimin said, voice steady. Tell me everything. Jungkook's eyes darkened, something fierce flickering in them. Fine, he whispered. You want the truth? All of it? Jimin nodded, breath shallow. Jungkook's hand slid to the back of Jimin's neck, gripping gently but firmly. I think about you too much. I watch you when you're not looking. I memorize the way you breathe. Sometimes I get jealous of the air around you because it touches you more than I do. Jimin's knees weakened at the confession. Jungkook continued, voice breaking with the weight of emotions he had held back for years. When you smile at someone else, something inside me twists. When Taehyung touched your shoulder earlier, I wanted to drag you away from him and he cut himself off again, shaking his head as though ashamed. You see, that's not normal. That's not okay. It's human, Jimin whispered, lifting his hand to touch Jungkook's wrist gently. It's honest. Jungkook's expression twisted. It's selfish. Maybe I want you to be selfish, Jimin said softly, his fingers trailing along Jungkook's arm. Just this once. Jungkook inhaled sharply, his breath stuttering for a moment. His voice dropped, barely audible. Jimin, if you keep talking like that, I won't be able to stop myself. Then don't stop, Jimin whispered. A sound escaped Jungkook, a choked, disbelieving exhale, and he pressed his forehead to Jimin's, eyes squeezed shut as if the closeness hurt. His hand tightened on Jimin's neck, and Jimin felt the tremble in Jungkook's body, the restraint he was fighting, the desire he was trying so hard to keep from spilling over. I can't lose you, Jungkook said, voice cracking. That's why I held back. Not because I didn't want you, but because I wanted you too much. Jimin lifted Jungkook's chin gently, forcing him to meet his eyes. You're not going to lose me. Jungkook stared at him, breath unsteady, emotions swirling violently behind his eyes, desire, fear, guilt, longing, all of it tangled into a chaotic storm. The lights flickered again, thunder roaring outside, but neither of them moved. Jungkook leaned in closer, his lips brushing the corner of Jimin's mouth, barely a whisper of contact, but enough to send shivers spiraling through them both. Jimin's breath hitched, his hands gripping Jungkook's shirt. For a moment, it felt like the world was going to break open, but Jungkook pulled back suddenly, chest heaving, his self-control returning with brutal force. He took a step away, running a shaky hand over his face. This is bad, Jungkook muttered. This is really bad. Jimin felt the absence of his touch like a wound. Why? Jimin asked, voice trembling. Jungkook looked at him, eyes full of torment. Because someone saw us earlier. Jimin froze. Who? Jungkook swallowed hard. Not Taehyung. A pulse of dread rippled through the room. It was someone worse, Jungkook whispered. And if they tell anyone, everything changes. For both of us. Jimin felt the air leave his lungs all at once, as if the storm outside had torn through the room and ripped the breath right out of him. Jungkook stood stiffly, shoulders squared, his expression torn between anger and fear so palpable Jimin could almost taste it in the space between them. Who? Jimin whispered, his voice barely holding together. Jungkook dragged a hand through his hair, pacing once, twice, before turning back to him. His voice came out low and rough. Manager Jeon. Jimin's stomach dropped. A cold wave swept through him, colder than the rain beating against the windows. Jeon was strict, calculating, and relentless, someone who never missed anything, never forgot anything, and certainly never ignored something he thought might endanger the group's public image. He saw us? Jimin asked, though he already knew the answer. Not everything, Jungkook said, shaking his head. But enough. Enough to start asking questions. Enough to think something's happening. His breath hitched, and he pressed the heel of his palm to his forehead. And if he reports it, if the company gets involved, things are going to get messy. Fast. Jimin took a step forward. Then talk to me. What exactly did he see? Jungkook looked away, jaw clenched tight. He walked by the studio right when you broke down. And I was holding your wrist. Too close. Too intense. His throat bobbed with a swallow. He called my name. I pretended nothing happened. But he didn't buy it. Jimin felt a flush of heat, anger, embarrassment, fear, all swirling together. So he thinks something's going on, Jungkook said quickly. And he'll want answers. Jimin shook his head. We didn't even do anything. That doesn't matter, Jungkook snapped. People don't need anything real to start creating their own version of the truth. And the company? They'll pick the version that benefits them, not us. The room tightened around them like a closing fist. Jungkook's eyes softened when he saw the panic building in Jimin's expression. He stepped closer, gently cupping Jimin's jaw. I won't let anything happen to you. To us. I swear. Jimin leaned into his touch, even as his heart hammered with fear. You say that, but you're shaking. Jungkook let out a shaky laugh. Of course I'm shaking. I just told you I want you so badly it scares me. And now someone might have seen enough to tear everything apart. Jimin lifted his hand, resting it over Jungkook's. Then we deal with it. Together. Jungkook stared at him, eyes softening in a way that made heat crawl up Jimin's spine. You really think we can handle this together? Even if things get ugly? Jimin's voice dropped to a whisper. Especially if they get ugly. The tension between them shifted, turned warmer, deeper, heavier. Jungkook's breath brushed Jimin's lips, his eyes flickering down for half a second before returning to Jimin's gaze. It was a silent question. A silent struggle. A silent surrender. Jimin, Jungkook murmured, voice trembling with restraint and desire all at once. You make it so hard to do the right thing. Then stop trying to do the right thing, Jimin breathed. Just do what feels real. Jungkook's grip on him tightened, fingers spreading along the side of Jimin's neck as though he needed to feel his pulse to stay grounded. His forehead pressed against Jimin's again, their breaths mingling, their bodies swaying closer without permission. You don't know what you're doing to me, Jungkook whispered. Maybe I do. Jungkook let out a low, broken sound, half frustration, half longing, and pulled Jimin closer, close enough that Jimin could feel the hard, uneven rhythm of his heartbeat against his chest. For a moment they stayed like that, bodies barely touching, but tension pulsing between them like electricity waiting for a spark. But then Jungkook froze. A shadow moved behind the frosted glass panel of the practice room door. Jimin felt Jungkook stiffen, his hand dropping instantly from Jimin's neck. His entire posture shifted, from vulnerable to guarded in a heartbeat. Someone's there, Jungkook murmured, barely audible. The shadow lingered. A silhouette, still, watching. Jimin's blood ran cold. Is it him? I don't know, Jungkook whispered. But whoever it is, they've been standing there for a while. The silhouette shifted again, slowly, deliberately, as if making sure they knew they were being watched. Then footsteps echoed down the hall. Jimin stared at the door, breath trembling. Jungkook, what do we do? Jungkook stepped in front of him instinctively, shielding him even though nothing had happened yet. We find out who it was. And we figure out how much they saw. Jimin grabbed his wrist before he could reach the door. And if they saw everything? Jungkook turned to him, eyes burning with determination, with fear, with something fiercely protective. Then we face it. No more running. The storm outside cracked like a whip, the windows trembling violently, the entire building seeming to shudder. Inside the dark practice room, Jungkook and Jimin stood together, very close, very scared, and on the brink of something neither of them could take back. And with someone watching from the shadows, the truth they'd tried so hard to hide was no longer theirs alone. The storm had finally quieted by the time morning came, leaving behind the soft glisten of rain across the pavement and a lingering chill in the air. Jimin walked slowly through the corridor, each step echoing with the weight of the night before. He hadn't slept, not even for a moment. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that silhouette behind the glass, and Jungkook's expression when he realized they were no longer alone in their secret. When Jimin reached the practice room again, Jungkook was already there, sitting on the floor with his back against the mirror. He looked exhausted, his head tilted back, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in uneven rhythms. But something about him looked quieter. Resolved. Hey, Jimin whispered. Jungkook's eyes opened. The moment he saw Jimin, the tension in his shoulders softened. You came. You knew I would. Jungkook let out a tired half-laugh. Yeah. I did. Jimin walked closer, then sat beside him, their arms brushing slightly. The touch was simple but grounding. Neither spoke for a moment, letting the silence settle between them like a shared breath. I followed the person from last night, Jungkook said suddenly, voice low. Or tried to. Jimin's heartbeat stuttered. Who was it? Not a manager. Not staff. Jungkook shook his head. It was one of the night janitors. He wasn't spying, he was just passing by and slowed down when he heard us. But he didn't stay. Jungkook rubbed his forehead with a hand. I panicked. I thought, worst case scenario. Jimin felt his body relax, the tension draining from his muscles. So no one is reporting anything? No, Jungkook murmured softly. No one is reporting anything. Jimin let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Good. I thought I know. Jungkook turned to him, eyes gentle. I thought the same. Silence drifted between them again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that waits, inviting, patient, fragile. Jungkook, Jimin whispered, voice steady despite the trembling in his chest. What happens now? Jungkook looked at him for a long time, something warm and aching flickering in his gaze. I don't want to hide from you anymore, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Not from what I feel. Not from what last night made impossible to ignore. Jimin swallowed, his heart swelling with something he'd been afraid to name until now. And you're sure? No, Jungkook laughed softly, shaking his head. I'm terrified. Still. Then he shifted, turning fully to face Jimin. But I'm more terrified of losing you than of whatever comes next. For a moment, neither moved. They just sat there, hearts thrumming in the quiet morning light. Jungkook's hand hesitated in the space between them. Jimin closed the distance, their fingers intertwined, slow and deliberate, as if sealing a promise without words. The simplicity of the gesture burned more than any kiss could have in that moment, because it was honest, chosen, steady. Whatever happens, Jimin murmured, we face it together. Jungkook squeezed his hand gently. Together. Outside, the last cloud of the storm drifted away, letting sunlight spill softly across the practice room floor. It painted them in warm gold, illuminating the resolve in their expressions, the relief in their breaths, the beginnings of something new, something fragile but undeniably real. Nothing dramatic needed to happen now. No more storms. Just two hearts finally resting in the truth they had spent years dancing around. Jimin leaned his head onto Jungkook's shoulder, and Jungkook let out a soft exhale, resting his cheek against Jimin's hair. No running, no pretending, just quiet understanding, and something tender blooming in the calm after everything they survived together. And that was enough. The story didn't need fireworks or cliffhanger to end. It ended with peace earned, fragile, honest. A beginning disguised as an ending. Jungkook closed his eyes, a small smile curving his lips as he whispered into the quiet, I'm glad you didn't give up on me. Jimin's fingers tightened around his, I never will. And the world, newly washed clean by the rain, seemed to exhale with them.